Welcome to a new episode of Alternative Indian Media. Globalists want to take over virtually everything, and that's why world needs people like Vladimir Putin. In our earlier episode on this topic, we correctly concluded that the Wagner mutiny was a hoax. It was a fake mutiny. Some people called it a botched-up mutiny or a civil war, but we think these are inappropriate. It was neither a mutiny nor a civil war. It was a case of psychological operation. Vladimir Putin met private military contractor PMC Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin just a few days before the start of this fake mutiny. Did Vladimir Putin tell Prigozhin to start this mutiny? We can safely assume Putin knew everything at least 48 hours before the start of this fake mutiny. From the satellite imagery, Vladimir Putin had up-to-date information about the mobilization of the Wagner forces. Wagner was amassing heavy equipment such as tanks, armored fighting vehicles in areas adjoining Luhansk and Rostov-on-Don. So, why didn't Vladimir Putin prevent this? Why didn't Putin stop Prigozhin and his Wagner mercenaries? As the fake mutiny unfolded, Putin addressed the nation, and he didn't directly mention the names of Prigozhin and Wagner. Not even once. Yevgeny Prigozhin made it clear that it was not a rebellion against Russian Federation or even President Vladimir Putin, rather it is an attempt to clean up the corruption in the Russian Ministry of Defense. Prigozhin's prime target was Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu and General Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. Prigozhin and his Wagner mercenaries marched into the Russian city of Rostov, took seize of the administrative building and some of the command centers of the Russian armed forces, and then vowed to march towards Moscow along M4 highway. However, at a later point in time, Prigozhin halted Wagner's march to Moscow to avoid bloodshed. Prigozhin then ordered all Wagner mercenaries to return back to bases. Negotiation took place with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko representing Putin. All charges against Prigozhin have been dropped and Prigozhin has been exiled to Belarus, which is a Russian ally. Alexander Lukashenko is a friend and ally of Vladimir Putin. Therefore, we can safely assume that Prigozhin has been pardoned. But is it possible in Vladimir Putin's Russia? One fine morning you start a coup or mutiny, and at the end of it, you go for a vacation or sabbatical, completely unhurt. Possible, if the entire thing is a hoax, an eyewash. If it was a hoax, then it must be a case of psychological operation. Putin is a former KGB officer, which is the predecessor of Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation or FSB. And these intelligence organizations specialize in psychological operation. So, what did Vladimir Putin want to achieve? Number 1. Putin wanted to consolidate power. He wanted to use this fake mutiny as a pretext to concentrate power around his most trusted people and his loyalists. Number 2. Vladimir Putin wanted to see who else joined Wagner mercenaries in their march to Moscow. Do any units from Russian armed forces join Wagner? If so, what is their stance? Do they also see them as crusaders against supposed corruption in the Russian Ministry of Defense, or do they rebel against the ruling establishment of Russian Federation? Does any members from the civil society join this fake mutiny, and under what circumstances? This would have blown their cover, and that was one of the objectives of Vladimir Putin. Number 3. As this fake mutiny was unfolding, I'm sure Russian FSB was busy monitoring all channels of communication. All the suspected entities were under surveillance. What they were communicating, with whom they were communicating, what kind of stance they were taking, whether they were jubilant or not, everything was being monitored. Number 4. This fake mutiny was aimed to blow the covers of all Western intelligence assets operating within Russian territory. Number 5. Western media was extremely jubilant when they saw Wagner mercenaries just 200 kilometers away from Moscow. Well, now Wagner chief Prigozhin is stationed in Belarus, just 100 kilometers from Kiev. Through this maneuver, Vladimir Putin has repositioned Wagner forces in Belarus threatening Kiev as well as Poland. Poland is now forced to strengthen its border with Belarus. Number 6. Vladimir Putin wanted to identify unruly elements within Wagner itself. Russian Ministry of Defense contract may not be extended to those Wagner mercenaries who joined this march to Moscow. Those who didn't join this march have started getting renewed contract from the Russian Ministry of Defense. Vladimir Putin wanted to make sure that all Wagner mercenaries comply the terms and conditions of the Russian Ministry of Defense and remain legally binding to it. Wagner mercenaries have been given two options: they can either join Russian army, or they may operate as Wagner forces from Belarus. Wagner forces have been told to hand over all heavy equipment such as tanks and infantry fighting vehicles to Russian army. Number 7. There was a possibility of a real coup or mutiny happening in Russia. Through this fake mutiny, Vladimir Putin crushed the possibility of a real mutiny. Putin will now use this fake mutiny as a pretext and start reshuffle, cleansing and purging operation within his administration, intelligence apparatus and military command and control, and thereby preventing the possibility of a real mutiny. Number 8. In a way, this fake mutiny was a real-life simulation or a drill. Vladimir Putin wanted to see how different entities within the Russian government function in coordinate with each other to thwart an attempted mutiny. Number 9. Vladimir Putin has sent a clear message to all Western powers that a real mutiny or rebellion might take place in the Western countries as well. A real mutiny is a possibility in France or Germany. Therefore, you can expect Vladimir Putin to start cleaning and purging operation in Russia. However, there is a flip side. In this process, Vladimir Putin might have angered some of the politicians and bureaucrats and military officers who might view Putin as someone who has orchestrated a rebellion against Russian Ministry of Defense using one Prigozhin and his Wagner. Therefore, Putin has to consolidate his power as early as possible. Putin also needs to protect his ally Prigozhin. Western intelligence might assassinate Prigozhin and put the blame on the Russian president. As an Indian, we can hope for the best. Remember, Russia's sovereignty and integrity ensures India's sovereignty and integrity. Thanks for watching this episode. Kindly share this episode and subscribe to this channel.